these is one of the 3 nymphs. I tied the casual dress and the red fox squirrel hair in the soft tackle version of it. And those are 2 of the nymphs that I use for bass fishing. And the third one I use is, again, from Polly Rosborough's book, Tying and Fishing the Fuzzy Nymphs. And it's the Nondescript Nymph. Kind of looks like that. And it's another one of those kind of just generic nymph patterns that can represent a whole lot of different things. So let's go ahead and tie it. The first thing I'm going to do is you want to use a 3 extra long, 2 extra heavy hook. And so I'm using a 5263. There's a number of different hooks out there you could use, but I'll use this one today. This is a good hook. So as always, first thing I'm going to do is crush the barb. And then I'll put the hook in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add weight to the hook. Now remember, I've shown you how to use your bobbin. Put your lead on a bobbin to use it. That way you can use it in such a way you don't have any waste. It's better than pulling a strip off and winding a strip. So what I'm going to do, first of all, this is a size 6 hook. So I'm going to follow my formula, 20 minus the hook size. So 20 minus 6 is 14. If I were to tie this on an 8, which I do, 20 minus 8 would be 12. So an 8, which is just the next size smaller, would only get 12 wraps of lead, just incrementally lighter. And that way your weight is all pretty proportional. So the way I'm going to start this, I'm going to put the lead on the far side of the hook shank here, and I'm just going to pinch it on. Then I'm going to start and get a wrap. There's 1, 2, 3. Now when you do this, you got to keep the bobbin pointed at the hook shank. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Now bring the lead up so that wrap comes around the bottom, and just use your little side cutters and snip it off. Now I'm going to push these wraps together and I'm going to twist them to tighten them up on the hook shank. So I'm twisting them like this. Now I'm going to back this lead up probably 2 eye lengths or so. 2, if you look at the diameter of the hook of the eye, or the eye of the hook rather. I'm going to come back at probably 2 of those. Then I'm going to lock this in by starting my thread in front, and I build a little thread dam, just a little cone of thread on the front of the lead like that. Now I bring the thread back, and I'm going to come back and capture the thread at the back and build another little dam at the back. And then I can pop that thread off. Now I've got this little thread that runs across the lead. So if I wind this way, I'm winding with the thread laps. That means my thread is going to sink down between, but it's going to grab that little band of thread that's going across and tighten it up. So now that thread band is under tension, and that it's locked on there. You don't need glue, you don't need anything else. The lead is locked on there. So my first step is you want to use some kind of a marabou type thing for the tail. I'm using just some whiting chickaboo. So I'm going to grab some feathers here, 3 or 4 of them maybe. And whatever, the original material, he talks about gathering some of the marabou-like fluff at the base of a pheasant feather. You can do that, any feather, really all feathers have some marabou-like stuff down at the base that you can use. But I'm going to use the tips on this one because I like the coloration. So the first thing is I'm going to take them, I'm going to take the 4 feathers and I'm going to match them up down here by the tips onto my desk here. So all I'm doing is I'm laying the feathers in here, matching the tips up as I go here. One more here. And then I'll gather that up, come back and Actually, I can probably take away one feather. Let's take one away. And that's not a bad little tail right there. So now I want my tail to extend. Probably I want the tail to be about half the length of the body. So I want the tail to extend about half the length of the body back. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna extend back. Let me grab my scissors here and get them in my hand. So I'm going to extend the feathers back so they extend back behind the tail about a half of body length. Switch hands and come right here at the back of the lead and cut them off. Okay. Now don't move them. Just hold them right in place and then gather the ends there. You just cut the few wraps. Now take the tail and hold it up and pull it towards you slightly and walk it back with your thread. Just kind of wind it back. If you hold it towards you, the thread will bring it around to the top, and that way you'll walk that tail right back and leave it on top of the hook shank, just like that. And you can see that it's coming right off the top of the hook shank. Now, one of the things about these type of flies where we wind materials forward, the principle is the last thing wound forward is the first thing you put on. Well, the last thing we're going to wind forward on this is going to be the feather. And so I've got some kind of golden olive here, which will be a nice feather. It's from a this is from a whiting bugger pack. And the length of the barbules make no difference in this. So I'm just going to pull this feather. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this feather and I'm going to come back here a little bit. And I'm going to pull the barbules back so I create a little separation like that. I drop that separation right on the tie-in point, and then I'm going to just wrap forward and tie down the tip. I don't even need to trim it. I'm just going to fold it back and just wrap it all right in there. It doesn't matter. It's going to be all underneath anyway. So I got my feather on. That's the last thing I wrap forward, so it's the first thing I put on. Then I'm going to wrap a rib. Okay, so I've got some gold holographic tinsel. You can use anything, gold wire, whatever, but I like to use this holographic stuff, put a little flash into the fly. So again, I'm going to advance my thread forward. Let me trim out a couple little barbules there. I'm going to capture the end of that flash, and then I'll just wrap it back to the tie-in point. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to dub the fly. And so what I've done, you see me do this before. You know, I like doing this. I like taking advantage of material. So what I've done, this is kind of the base of the dubbing. It's just a hare's mask. Now the original pattern, Polly Rosborough uses a yarn, and you can use a yarn if you want, but I'm going to do a dubbing on it. But this is the base of the dubbing. To it, I'm adding a little bit of this olive brown trilobal, so that's going to be a little bit of a synthetic in it. And then just like on the other patterns, I'm going to come to my disco dub, which is going to add some sparkle into the fly. And so this little dubbing ball, you can see it sparkling in the light here. That's the little dubbing ball that I made to tie these flies with. So what I'm going to do, and you saw this technique on the casual dress, I'm going to come forward here, create a loop of thread. So I've got this loop of thread, and I'm going to walk it back to the tie-in point. Okay. Now I'm going to put my scissors down here. I'm going to take small amounts of dubbing. Don't take a lot, and just start putting it onto the thread like this. I'm just spinning it on the thread with my fingers. I mean, moving my fingers in a counterclockwise direction. That way, like especially when you direct dub, when you push the dubbing up and you tighten it up, counterclockwise will help it to tighten up when you then start to wrap it as well. But I'm really just putting dubbing along this dubbing loop. I think I'm just about as far out as I can go. Okay. Now I'm going to get my little hook here, my dubbing hook. I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to hold this up. That way you can see the loop, so you can see what's going to start happening as I twist it. See how everything is tightening up? That loop is really, that dubbing is really tightening up on that loop. Now I'm going to take my thread, make sure that dubbing loop is right there at time point. I'm going to bring my thread forward. Okay, so now I'm going to just start wrapping that noodle forward. And ideally, what I want to get here is I want to get a nice taper going in my body. So as I come forward, I'm going to kind of put each wrap a little bit tighter, maybe a little bit on top of the previous wrap, just to try to build a little taper into this. If you don't quite get it exact, which takes some practice, this one's going to work out pretty good. You can always direct dub a little dubbing at the end just to kind of fill in, and I think I'm going to have to do that. I can see that I've got, I'll cut it here and finish tying down that thread. So I'm a little bit further back. So now I'm going to just adjust it by, I'm not going to bother with another dubbing loop. I'm just going to take a little bit of my dubbing. And this is called direct dubbing, where you just put it on the thread and wrap it, tighten it up. So see, it's tightening up. Each wrap, just tighten it a little bit. Kind of spread it out. Keep the amount of dubbing you have on the thread minimal. There we go. There we are. Yeah, so you can see I'm getting a kind of a nice taper in that body. Okay, so the next thing now I'm going to wrap forward is the flash. So, and what I'm going to do is, remember, normal wrap is going away from you across the top. So I'm going to reverse wrap this where I come back across to me. And the reason I'm doing it like that is because then when I wrap the hackle, it's going to cross hatch this flash. So I'll just kind of come back through here. That's going to add a lot of nice little subtle flash to this fly. It's not a huge piece. You could use wider flash if you want. Make it flashier depending on kind of where you fish. Okay, now I'm going to take my hackle and I'm going to wind it the way we normally do, where it goes away from me. That way it's going to cross hatch over the top of the gold flash. So you can see I'm just winding this feather forward. This is kind of similar to what you do for a woolly bugger. Then I get up here in the front, and right at the front I'm going to do a couple wraps right there at the front. There we go. So now let me clip that, pull everything back here, and we'll create a nice little thread head. And then I'll come in here and use my whip finisher. Oh, I've got a stray fiber there that doesn't. What's going on with that one? There we go. Okay, just do a little quick whip finish there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it as I'm going to put my scissors on this kind of an angle like this, and I'm going to cut this like that, and I'm going to make a cone out of it. So let me go around and do that. And I'm just keeping my scissors at kind of that angle as I work my way around. And just kind of come back around, and any stray ones you see, kind of cut out of it. So there you go. I mean, right there, that one could go right in your box. And you could fish it just like that, and it would fish really well. Okay? But if we step back for a moment and we start to think, well, what does this represent? Okay, well, obviously it could represent a little dragonfly nymph, but it could also represent a little bait fish. You know, if you fish warm water lakes a lot, you know, the bass, all the fish that spawn, the bass, the bluegill, all of them, you know, when the fish hatch, they're little fingerlings. You know, they're not very big. They're like about this size. And there's a lot of them around, and they're a good food source for the fish. And I've seen them crash through schools of these things. I've seen largemouth bass crash through schools of these things and eat them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a fish mask. This is a fish flyman fish mask, and I'm going to fit it to the front of this fly. And I'm going to take this pattern, and this is my variation. This is what I said, I do a little variation on it. This is what I do. So what you want to do is you want to come here and just kind of fit it on, kind of make sure it's going to fit on there okay. And it looks pretty good to me. I like the size and everything. So now what I'm going to do is pull it off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some UV. This happens to be loon, but any UV you have works fine. And if this is the thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull these fibers back, and right here on the thread wraps, I'm just going to put a little bubble, not very big, just a little tiny bubble right there of this glue. And then I'm going to take my fish mask and I'm going to push it back into that. Now I see, so I've got some glue that has come out here. So I'm going to take it and just dab it off. That's all I need to do. Okay, so my fish mask is there. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here with my thread, and right in front of the fish mask, I'm going to just build up a little bit of a thread dam just to kind of hold it back in there, and add a little thread to the front of this, not a lot. And then come in and do a whip finish. I'm keeping my wraps up there against the thread, the fish mask. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look it over, make sure it's square where I want it to be. Okay, now this mask is clear, so if you hit your UV light, the glue underneath will get hard. So I'm just going to come in here with my UV light. And now you come back and you can feel that head is on there now. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some living eyes. And the thing about living eyes and UV, the 4mm eyes fit into the number 4 fish mask very nicely. And so I use the number 4 eyes, and for this particular pattern, I'm going to use the earth eyes, which have a little bit of a olive gold cast to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Zap-A-Gap, just put a little dot, just a little dot of Zap-A-Gap in there, not that much. Come and get one of my eyes, and I'll put it into that little dot of glue and kind of push it in there, position it and hold it for a second. Okay, now I'm going to come to the other side, do the same thing on the other side. Just a little dot of Zap-A-Gap. And then come in here with my eye. And take my little stick here, just kind of hold it in place for a second. Super glues like this they harden when you deprive them of oxygen. So that's why, like if you get some on your finger and you stick your finger together, the minute you press your fingers together, they stick. So all you got to do is hold it for a second. And then what will happen is I'm going to come in with the UV clear, which will not only help adhere it, but it'll seal that, which will make the super glue even harder. So now I'm going to take and I'm going to put a little bubble of, now this is the flow. This is a thin one, so you want to use a thin one. Again, whatever you use is fine. It doesn't matter as long as it's clear. I'm just going to start with a little bit, just kind of fill that socket, let it flow back and forth a little bit. Maybe just a touch more. There we go. And then hit it with my light. Rotate it over. This is the same thing on the other side. Just let it flow a little bit. Make sure that little eye socket gets filled up, just a little bit. You don't want a huge bubble of it there. In fact, as I'm looking at it this direction, I can see both bubbles are pretty symmetrical, pretty much the same size. So I'll come in here. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'll just add a little this flow right here to the threads at the front edge of the fish mask. I'm just kind of pushing that around, just a very thin little coat. I don't need a lot, but that'll help to make the thread wraps and the whole fly a little tougher. Although, what I'm going to do, just like I do with bass bugs and using hard as nails, is I'm going to take a feather here, grab one of my just big feathers, and I'm going to run it through the eye of the hook. And then once again, hit it with my light. And so there you have it. I do these in black. I'll do them in white. White is a really good crappie color. You know, just use make a white, use white dubbing, a cream white dubbing, and put some pearlescent crystal flash mixed in with the dubbing. White's a good crappie color. So you can do these in a lot of different colors. I do them mainly this size, and one size bigger and one size smaller. That's about the extent to which I do them. But there's the third in the series of nymphs that I told you I would do for you. Between the casual dress and the red fox squirrel hair nymph and this one, I think that's a good group of nymph patterns. I don't know that you need any more than that to go and catch some bass on nymphs. So give it a try. And if you like this video, hit subscribe to my YouTube channel.